Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollands High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Alright, so today I'm going to be showing you how to create a building that we have been using in our strategic defense game here. So you can see the buildings take damage, and as they get more and more over time, they kind of crumble down. These are just very quick. We're going to throw them together in Photoshop. So I'm going to head over to there. Now the size of your buildings is up to you. I'm going to go ahead and create a new document. In our game, we have it set up to 640 by 480 for the maximum screen size. So you don't want, of course, in my little version here, the screen size is a little bit taller. But let me go ahead and reset this real quick. There we go. So this is the standard size. Now when you make this, you want to give enough room between the height of your buildings and the sky, because if you don't, then you're not going to have enough time, or the player won't have enough time to react to the incoming missiles. So you want these to be kind of lower. And mine, I went ahead and I put water down here, so I raised the sky up. But for hours in class, we're going to be doing this at 640 by 480. So again, you want to make sure your buildings are tall enough to look like buildings, but not so far up that they're going to hit the sky. So you go, and then you can kind of, if you did 640, 480. So let's assume this is the maximum screen size. You can grab your selection tool and kind of draw out a rectangular shape that you would like your building to be. Now this is a decent shape for me. I don't really need anything spectacular. You can make them longer, you can make them shorter, you can make a skyscraper. Again, you want to have enough time for the player to react. So you don't want these to be absurdly high. Otherwise, when the missiles come in, they're going to create, they're going to take damage on the buildings, but then you're not going to have time to react. So I'm going to make one about that tall is fine. Once I drop my selection box, I'm going to go ahead and hit Image, Crop. And that's going to give me the rough shape of my building. Double click my lock to unlock my layer. Hold Control, hit the plus key to zoom in. This is the rough shape of our building. We're going to do the first style, and then we're going to build off of that. So let's say whatever kind of texture you want in here, if you want it to be brick, or if you just want it to be like a stucco kind of detailing, we're going to do that first. And then as we copy this over, we're going to add damage to it as we go. So for me, I'm just going to go ahead and do a very quick, I'll do something different. I'll do like a red brick color. That's a good auburn brownish red. I'm going to click on my other color. I'm going to grab another one. That one's kind of dark, so let's make this one kind of light. You can pick any colors you want. This is where your artistic ability kind of comes into play. And I'm going to go up to Filter. We'll go ahead and render. Throw some clouds in there. Give this some mixing of the two colors. Filter, I'm going to jump over and give this guy some noise. That way there's some speckling, just to add some texture. Now this is going to be just basic 2D. I'm not going to do depth, anything really too extravagant. If you wanted to, you can add layers of depth on here. But for this particular demonstration, we are not going to be doing that. I'm going to jump over into Filter again, go to the Filter Gallery. And we're just using Photoshop's different filters to give us a look or a style. And this texturized one looks like, from a distance, it kind of looks like a stony brick layering. I'm going to go ahead and adjust my scaling. Adjust the relief. I can bring this up, make it look a lot more like brick. Bring it down, make it more subtle. I actually like that. It kind of has a sort of like an old rustic look. I'm going to hit OK. So this is a very quick body for the building. Now I just need some windows. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. Down here in our Layers tab, we have a new layer. Go ahead and click that. I'm going to name the bottom layer, name that building. And I'm going to name this top layer window. Oops. Go ahead and double click on the word, change it to window. If I could spell today. Grab my selection tool, and I'm just going to draw a selection box. A little rectangle for my window. Now whatever color you want to use for your window is up to you. I'm going to go ahead and grab a very pale blue. Just because glass usually has a subtle blue tint to it. Okay. You can darken this, you can make it look sort of like downtown St. Pete. I don't know how I feel about that. Image, adjustments, levels. Like that could work. I didn't really explain what I was doing there. I went ahead and under my levels, I pulled my lighter tab up to kind of darken it in. And then on the input levels, you have these little tabs here. And if you draw them up to these little peaks, you can adjust the values of how much shading or contrast is in them. And hit cancel, because I like what I made already. I'm going to deselect by grabbing my selection tool and clicking off the screen. You could alternatively go to select and hit deselect there. Grab my move tool. I'm going to hold down Alt on the keyboard, click on my window, and drag. There's one window. I'm going to space this out. That looks good to me. Do that again. And one more. I have 4 windows. I'm going to go ahead and select my top window, come down to my bottom window, hit the Shift key, and then click the bottom window. What that's going to allow me to do is grab all of these at the same time, grab my move tool. I'm just going to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to sort of push these guys over. There, that's fairly center. Okay. Holding Alt on the keyboard, I'm going to click and drag. And I'm going to do that all the way down. Okay. Now, if you want to add a door or something down here at the bottom, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to stop at this point. And I'm going to move on to showing you how to add the a little bit more detailing on the windows and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this top window, come all the way down to my very bottom window, right click, hit merge layers. So now all of my windows are on a single layer. From here, I'm going to grab my magic wand tool. If you don't see the magic wand, you might have quick selection up there. Just click and hold, grab magic wand. Make sure you have your window layer. Click outside the windows. You'll see the selection box here. It highlights around the windows. I'm going to go ahead and hit select, inverse, and now it's grabbing the actual window squares. I'm going to come down to my building and press the delete key. What that's going to do is cut out this little section for where our windows should go. Now the reason I did this is we're going to add some shadows. I'm going to go ahead and turn my windows back on. I'm going to drag those to behind or below the building. And the reason for that is layer stacking. Inside of Photoshop, whatever's on top is going to appear on top. Whatever's on bottom is going to appear on bottom. So if I were to shift this image over, for example, it covers that layer. See that? Whereas if it were the other way, and I were to shift the windows over, the windows kind of cover the backdrop. Now why this matters is when you go ahead and add shadow to it, you don't want the windows to appear on top of the building. So I'm going to drag this back down. I'm going to click on the building, right click, go to blending options. You have a few different things you can do here. We can add a drop shadow. Right there it adds some depth to our windows. Looks like they're in there a bit. You could do an inner shadow. You could come down and add a bevel and emboss, do some contouring. You could do a color overlay, gradient overlay. Add some blending to it, drop the opacity. You can drop in a pattern. You can do so with like a stroke outline, basically, kind of make it cartoony. I'm going to go up to drop shadow. Now anything in these settings will adjust how this shadow is applied. Opacity, of course, has to do with how strongly the shadows are there or how softly they appear. So all the way up, they're very sharp. All the way down, it's non-existent. By default, it's 75. The blend mode on here is multiply, but you can change this to anything that you like. You can make it screen. Screen will make it a little bit brighter. Overlay is similar to multiply, but it's not quite as dark. I'm going to go back to multiply. The angle here, when you get into adjusting, it has a little tab that says use global lighting. What that means is every image or every layer inside of Photoshop is obeying this particular command. So if I were to adjust the lighting here, the angle, it would affect it for every object inside of Photoshop. If you only want it to affect one object, uncheck global lighting. And then the global lighting will be, the lighting will actually be different for each object. Okay, I'm going to set this back to 120. Global lighting for me is fine, but you can figure out where the light's going to come from in your game and kind of apply this shadow as need be. I'm going to draw my distance down to 2. The spread, I'm going to make that 1. And then the size, by default it's set to 5. I'm going to set that to I think 3 is good for me. Now you can do a few different tricks between inner shadow and bevel. With the right adjustments, an inner shadow can look a lot like a bevel. And the reason for that is the bevel and emboss uses a little bit of lighting trick to fool your eye into seeing depth. And we can do the same thing here. I could adjust my distance, bring up the size, play with the choke a little bit. You can kind of round off your edges just subtly so. If you want more of a rounding feature, you can uncheck that and come down to bevel and emboss. Make it a little bit more round. Then you have your options for if it's an inner bevel or an outer bevel. See that? Makes this real sharp on the edges. You can do an emboss, pillow emboss. It's kind of cool. Stroke emboss. Inner bevel. You can also have smooth, chisel hard, chisel soft. So chisel hard will harden the edges. Okay. Chisel soft will do something similar, but there's going to be a little bit less sharpness on the edges. I'm going to go to chisel hard. I'm going to bring back the size a little bit. Now, let's say we put the size up and you adjust soften. What soften does is it smooths out those rough edges. Like this is a very sharp edge here, and that kind of rounds it off. For me, I don't want to round this edge. I want this to be brick, so I want it to be kind of sharp on these edges. So I'm going to bring soften to 0. I'm going to drop my size down to... Actually, 2 works. We have some additional adjustments. Again, this uses global lighting. You can always uncheck that if you want it to only affect this object. You can adjust the way the contour fall off happens, the way the light hits this. You can go around and play with these, see what kind of results you get. I'm just going to kind of quickly flip through. And if you see one that you like, and you're like, well, it's close to what I want, you can always double click onto it. And you get this little graph here that you can manipulate and make your own fall off. I'm not going to save this, I'm just going to use it as an example. Hit cancel. And again, you have your blending modes, you have highlight modes. Screen will make things a little bit brighter. And of course you have your opacities for both of those. You can adjust them, see how it does with the effect. I'm going to leave that at 75. And I'll leave that one at 75. And I'm kind of happy with this. So I'm going to hit OK. If you want, you can make it look like light is hitting your windows. You can go to your window layer, double click, it'll bring up your blending options. And you can add an inner glow. And it'll kind of make it look like light is hitting these. So let's go ahead and adjust. Again, you have your choke and your size. So I'm going to bring the size down. Let's bring the choke up. It's probably a little too high. What if I go to here and bring down the opacity? Your technique between softer and precise. Softer will create a smoothness in between. Precise will make it very sharp. So that. I'll leave range at 50. Jitter is a lot to do with speckling, kind of like noise. So let's say I adjust the size and I bring up the jitter. Let's see if we can get a good... It's hard to see on here, but jitter does kind of what noise does. You can also adjust your color. Let's say if you wanted this to be, red, you can adjust that. You can also adjust the blending mode for the actual effect. So I can click this one. You can kind of go through these. What I sort of want is a bit of a little, like a solar glare that kind of goes on here. So that's what I'm looking for. I hit. Hit cancel real quick. Hop back in. Not getting the effect that I want. How about contour? Let's see the way I can make this hit the windows. It's actually not too bad. And if you don't ever see the kind of effect that you want, you might have to go in and do these highlights by hand. These tools are made to kind of speed things up, but they're not always as accurate as what you might have in mind. So in my case, it's not doing what I want. I'm going to leave this at normal. And I'm not going to use the inner glow. I'm actually quite happy with the way this is set up, so I'm going to hit cancel. Alright, let's assume that this is the first building. This is before a missile ever hit it. We're going to select your top one, select your bottom layer, drag this down into its own folder. This one right in between this little half moon looking thing and this little guy here. Oops. That's going to create a new group. Go ahead and name that building 1. Or you can name it frame 1, whichever. And then I'm going to come up, image, canvas size. Now when we do this, we're basically making an animated sprite. So we need to make a new frame for each new I guess series of destruction, basically. Go ahead and click to pin this to the left. And go to %. So if 100% is one frame, then if I want to do, let's say, 4 iterations of this, then simple math, 400, and the width will adjust my canvas size wide enough so I can put 4 buildings on there. Okay, because each new building will be its own frame. I'm going to hit OK. Make sure I have my move tool selected. Hold down Alt on the keyboard. Click and drag the building. There you go. If it doesn't let you drag your building, make sure you have it selected. I'm going to name the new one Building 2. Alright, so don't go ahead and try and make all the other buildings just yet. We're going to do some damage on this one, and then we'll copy it over. We want the damage to look like it's having a transition over a series of strikes. So if you just go and like break this one up and then break this one up and then break this one up, without having that transition, it's just going to be staggered. And let's say if this window breaks and all of a sudden over here that window's fine, it's not going to be, you know, consistent. If you're like me and you watch a movie and you see one guy pick up a red cup and put it down, now it's a green cup, you know, continuity is a big deal. So you want to make that look as consistent as possible. I'm going to jump into building 2. See this little tab here? You can click that. You can have access to the actual building itself. Come over to filter. I'm going to go to filter gallery. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so I can see. And I'm going to add some cracks to this building. So I'm going to click right here. And here's some quick cracks. Go ahead and adjust your sliders. Kind of like the way that works. My depth. Pretty good. Let's see. Crosshatch. Well, that's kind of cool. You kind of go through all the different options here. This one kind of looks like they had like a plaster outline or outer shell, and then it kind of broke away. That's not bad. I like the little divots here and there. All right, go back up. Accented edges, angled strokes. All right, so I think I'm going to keep it at this one right here. That's the most consistent effect that I can see. You have other options. You can always go and click through these and see what you get. Now, this blends between 2 different colors. So if you get something like this, you can always go ahead and use your blending modes to kind of get your color back. I'm going to go ahead and stick with this one. Okay. Hit OK. And there's some basic damage. I want to darken this up. There's some red splotches. So what I'm going to do, let's go up to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. Actually, let me see the other building so I can compare. I think the default settings are going to be as close as I can get for this. But that's fine. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Going to drop that. Now I need to crack the windows. So again, I'm going to go up to my filter gallery. I'm just going to reapply. That's a pretty quick window cracking. I don't like that effect. Let me go and adjust it some more. Depth. How about that one? Let me see what other options there are. Again, if you don't find a blending mode that does a quick job for you, there's nothing wrong with you doing it by hand. Like this one here, this smudge stick creates sort of a warped effect. Let's see how that looks. It almost makes the windows look like they're made of water. That might not be too bad. And as I've mentioned in my other videos, the more things you do by hand, the better it's going to look in general. I'm just trying to be quick about it. When you do things as a rush job, it really looks like a rush job. So keep that in mind if you're doing industry work. This wouldn't be something you'd do. But I do like that effect. I hit OK. And there's some quick cracked windows and some damage on the building. Now we are doing this inside of Allegro, and we are using the magic hot pink magenta color as our clear to color background. So I'm going to hit a new layer, drag this up to the top, because again, layer stacking. And I'm going to grab that magic pink color, 255 red, 255 blue, 0 green. And I'm going to use that to make some holes in my building. The reason I'm doing it this way instead of using the erase tool is Photoshop will try to blend the pixels together, and Allegro 4.2 doesn't handle transparency very well. So we're going to have to cheat transparency by using our clear to color effect. I'm going to grab my pencil tool. If you don't have your pencil tool, it's under the paintbrush. So if you see the paintbrush there, click, go to the pencil. Again, I go to the pencil because this is going to give us sharp edges. Since we want these to be cut away, we want them to be as sharp as possible. So go ahead and make sure I have that layer selected, and I'm just going to name that clear to color. And anything covered by this magic pink will be deleted by our clear to color algorithm inside of Allegro. And you want it to be as precise and as sharp as possible, because otherwise you'll have that leftover pink color, sort of like in this building here. When it takes damage, it's that leftover pink. That one wasn't cleared away very well. And the other thing you have to look for is floating pixels, because in the real world, these particles would not float. And that'll work for basic damage on top of the building. If you want to add an effect like it was burned, we can do that as well. I'm going to grab a new layer. I'm going to bring this down underneath my clear to color, because I don't want the burns to be on top of our magic pink, because if this gets shaded, it won't clear. I'm going to name this burns. Press the D key on the keyboard. It'll bring up black and white. That's our default. I'm going to go to Filter. And actually before that, I'm going to grab the Magic Wand tool, come down to my building. I'm going to click outside the building, hold Shift, click the other side of the building. And you see these, I'll go ahead and hide the first building. You can see these two little highlighted points. Filter, Inverse. And what this is going to do is allow me to select the space of my building. If I were to click on the building itself, the Magic Wand is going to try to grab all the colored pixels that are the same, and I'm not going to get a clear cut of my building. So I'm clicking all these, the larger space of all the same pixels. In this case, there's no pixels here or here, so I'm just going to grab those areas and select Inverse. Now I have this. Go back to my Burns layer, Filter, and go down to Render, Clouds. You see how it makes this wonderful cloudy gradient over top? We can blend that in there. We can go to Opacity and drop this down. We can go to Normal. Let's say Multiply. We can do an Overlay, so on and so forth. But I want to make this look like only certain parts of the building have been burned. So first what I want to do is I want to adjust this with I can't speak today. First thing I want to do is apply a layer mask. So I'm going to come down to this little dot inside this square, and that's going to apply a layer mask on top of my burns. Make sure I have my burns selected. Again, I'm going to select, hold Shift, click that side, select Inverse. Make sure the layer mask is selected. You can select either one of these. But for this case, I want to make sure the layer mask is selected. Be sure of that. Filter, do a new cloud. You can see how this has a layer of transparency on it now. I'm going to jump over to Image, Adjustments, Levels. And inside of our Levels tab, if I drag this guy up to this graph here, you'll start to see certain areas of our mask start to fog out and other areas of it end up clearing. And you can adjust how clear or how foggy the burns are applied to this. And I'm going to adjust now. Right now I have it really foggy. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the levels of the actual layer, and that'll bring out some of those darks. So grab this. Let's say I like that. I'll hit OK. I'm going to grab the layer itself. And Image, Adjustments, Levels. Push this up. Push that up. And the way this reads, anything that is light will show up as solid. Anything that's black will kind of show up as transparent on the mask. So let me just kind of bake this out a little bit more. There we go. There's some dark burns here. Go back to the actual layer mask. Go back to my levels. Here you can see how strongly or how lightly those burns are applied. But I think that'll work. Okay. So we have building 1, building 2. And now I have my second building grid. I'm going to go grab my move tool. Make sure the layer is selected. hold Alt on the keyboard, click, drag. Here's building number 3. I'm going to go ahead and name that. Hide my other 2 layers. Open up building 3. Grab my clear to color. I'm going to go ahead and do some more adjustments here. Let's see. Make sure I grab my magic pink. Grab a speckled brush. Let's say I hit it right about there. I think that'll work. Now remember, you can't have anything that's floating, so if there's no structure, then you'd have to cut it away. Since this is being held up kind of by this wall and this wall, I could probably get away with that, but I'm not going to let it stay that way. So I'm going to cut this way. That'll work. Again, no floating pixels. Alright, now if you wanted to make these windows look like they were like busted out, but there was still a room there, you can use a darker gray. I'm going to grab my little eyedropper. I'm going to grab this dark gray color right in here. And grab this other one. Grab my little pencil tool. Kind of swap back and forth between them. You kind of go over each one of these windows. You can adjust the way the cracks are. Let's say this guy got cracked this way. Let's add some cracks over here. Grab a speckle brush. Remember, in the real world, shadows aren't truly 100% black, so you might have to go back over these and adjust the different tones that are in there. Alright. I'll say that's good enough for that one. And then for building number 3, or building number 4, go ahead and grab your Move tool. Make sure building number 3 is selected. Alt on the keyboard, click and drag. Alright. Now if you wanted to go back and adjust the burns on this building, you're more than welcome to. You can jump back in and adjust your burns and then recopy it over. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and add some more destruction here. Grab my magic pink again. And let's cut this section of the building away. Now also be careful as you're cutting to not cut into the other layer cell. Like over here. Yes, the magic pink will be erased, so it probably won't matter in the grand scheme of things. But if this gets applied to this building, it's going to have this streak here, right? And it's going to be cut away. So you don't want to have anything that doesn't belong in that frame. Okay? All right. Grab some speckles. And actually, I'll need the speckle for that effect, but I do need it just for down here. Now, if you ever want to guarantee that you're not going to draw pixels outside of your selected zone, you can do what I did here, is draw a selection box. And when you color inside that box, you won't color outside. Forces you to stay between the lines, which is awesome. Okay. And actually, I think I'll go a little bit further. Why not? And to just move this, I use the arrow keys on the keyboard to adjust my box's positioning. Okay. And I think that'll work. Oh, I have some floating pixels. Okay. And if you want to go through and bust up some of these windows, you're more than welcome to. But that'll be my fourth building. If I turn all of them on, you can see the transition. No missiles hit. One or two missiles have hit. A couple more. A couple more. I'm going to go ahead and say File. Save As. And I'm going to go ahead and drop this in. Programming. Sure, Strategic Defense version 2. And I'm going to say I'll do building small d, because I already have a few of these. The first file I'm going to save is the PSD file. This is going to allow us to come back and modify our layers if we ever need to. And then the second file I'm going to save out is going to be a BMP file, or a bitmap file. The reason for that is Allegro 4.2. We are using the load bitmap function, and you want to make sure that you are loading a bitmap. Load bitmap does not load PNGs or JPEGs without any fancy adjustments to the back end. So there we go, building D underscore small. Make sure it's 24-bit. Okay. Jump back in. I'm going to close this and open the correct one here. Programming, defense. Okay. Jump over to my buildings, struct. Change building underscore C to building underscore D. I'm also going to make sure that programming, that I have the correct size of the building itself. So the dimensions 312 by 185. All right, so 185 will be the height, and then 312. It was 312, right? Yes. So 312 divided by the number of frames, 4 frames. So 78. Down here inside of our struct, also tell it its width and its height. That way the collision box is accurate. And it render, compile. So our buildings are drawn a little bit off where they need to be, but that's fine. Here they go. You can see this one where the magic pink is kind of not being cleared. There might be an error in the image file. It cleared there just fine, cleared there just fine. If I go back and look at the magic pink, it might actually be not quite as magical or pink as I thought. And it is not. If you look up here, it's not 0. It should be 0 for this one. Okay. Grab building number 3. Jump back in, hit play. There we go. Now these buildings are taller than my previous one, so I'll have to readjust where the street kind of sits, but that is how to make a very quick building inside of Photoshop that you can apply in your 2D game. All right. Have a fantastic one.